Hey folks, Studio here. No time. No time at all. We gotta go ahead and talk about this game. So last time we left off, High and the rest of Orbit were getting demolished. Let's watch this and just feel bad for Orbit. So they're not able to win this fight. They're already down gold. What's gonna happen as soon as Ferris gets a chance to do something? They're gonna go for Baron. And when they go for Baron, they're gonna be beefy. They're gonna be strong. They're gonna be one of those terrifying compositions where you don't want to be up against them because they'll push and kill you. So. What do you do now as Orbit? What is your next option? Well, who survived? Lemonation. What did he have? Oracles. You still have that going for you. So you can kind of roam across the map. If you see the enemy team, they could still win a 4v5 or a 5v4 on Orbit. If they have all 5 members and just 4 members of the enemy team, they're not going to have that much beef. And that is the big problem with Ferris' team. Mandatory Cloud on Jace is relatively squishy. He has a GA, he has the Last Whisper and Hex Drinker, like he has some tanky items and lifesteal, but nothing too tanky. He's only at 2200 HP, and the only time he'll have good resistances and mitigation is when he's in Hammer Stance. So, really, Mandatory Cloud's not going to be that big of a threat. Balls, kind of the same deal. He has decent mitigation with an Abyssal and with a GA, but he doesn't have a lot of HP. Even though he's at 6 stats, he only has 2800 HP, well now 3000 since he blew a potion, but he's not that tanky. Xmithy is tanky. 3400 HP, he's going to have his ultimate. He's actually very tanky. Muffin Key, though, support, even though it's Leona, will be tanky for 6 seconds after removes Misfortune. Not tanky. So, the enemy team is relatively squishy. That's important to know. It's very important to know. Their damage, however, is insane. So, Balls on Cho'Gath, it's AP Cho'Gath. How much damage is he going to do? Well, Rupture does 800 damage. Feral Scream does 700 damage. And really, the burst is high on Ferris. That is their big gimmick. So what is High going to try and do in response? Well, I actually missed the start of that fight, so sorry about that. Whoa, weird bug. Let's watch Xmithy go ahead, run in, and start this fight. So we see people from Ferris over there. Xmithy, he's going to start the fight like many Olafs do, which is running at the enemy team. He gets acceleration gated in by Jace with some sweet synergy, and just charges in. At this point, this is not the fight Orbit wants. I mean, Lemonation has to use ultimate on people who really aren't affected by it, and High's trying to initiate in the enemy team, but he has to pop Zonius to survive, and because the Sona ultimate was used, there's not a lot he can do in response. So Orbit, they've lost 2 members, the enemy team has Baron, the enemy team doesn't have sustain besides Baron buff, and they're getting pushed on right now. They keep trying to poke, keep trying to fight. They know that Aftermoon's at about half HP. A lot of the GAs are down in the enemy team, and they might be able to come out equal in a fight. They really don't want to lose the inhibitor. They really don't want to lose their base, even though it's relatively likely at this point. So they give up the inhibitor. V-Team's trying to poke out. Yen's trying to show his presence, show his face, be like, I'm Rise, I'm scary. It's not going to be enough, though. And this is important to know. They're making the enemy team that aware that they're there. So they know that the rest of Orbit is trying to find something, trying to catch something, but they're not actively pursuing it. So because of that, they're not being engaged on, but they're not letting the enemy team necessarily go crazy or do just completely risky things without any punishing. Now, they do have 4 people up now. High, they just have to wait on him. But they don't have Sona ultimate, they don't have any ultimate except Yuzuki's up. And, well, High's, but it's High, he's dead. So, what do they do to defend this turret? They do the same thing. They show their presence. When Xmithy shows up and is being aggressive, they have to back off. And what happens? They lose their inhibitor. They're getting pressure quite a bit, and it does go down. At this point, Ferris actually just runs away as a Mandatory Cloud is being super aggressed on, and then they turn around to try and stop the fight. And what happens for Orbit? Well, really, they're kind of in that same spot. They don't have any of the big ultimates up. They do have decent damage on V-Team, but that's really it. Is the decent damage enough? Somewhat, but not really. And this is the point in the game where I actually thought Ferris was about to lose. I believe there was a brief pause at this time, and people were saying, well, if that's going to happen right now, at the 30-minute mark, if they're already losing their second inhibitor, they're probably done. Ferris, though, they're playing safe. They know they're really low, and even with Baron buff and their decent regen, V-Team and Yuzuki combined could take them out very easily. Elimination's about its ultimate up. It's safe for Ferris to back off. And this is one of those things where, alright, they could have made a bigger play, they could have gone for top inhibitor, they could have tried to really punish Orbit for those couple of deaths, but the smart thing was to be safe. Now, being safe is not always the best option. Being safe gives the enemy time to come back. Now, we don't really talk about this. Everybody says it's a good thing when the inhibitor is up. But what does this mean for Orbit? Well, the creep waves will push in. There's also the extra creep being generated by the super minion. And because of that, V-Teen and the rest of his team, and High as well, can just farm up and get gold and try to come back via gold. Now, that's not going to be easy. It's going to take a long time. They've lost so many turrets. They've lost, Baron and Dragons. They're so far behind in kills, too, that really what doesn't matter is the gold. Just the fact they don't have those objectives is more important. But they're still getting gold. They're still getting more income than all of Ferris is. It's like StarCraft. Imagine if you could have a giant army but no income. In this case, Ferris has a giant army. They're very scary. Could easily steamroll Orbit, but they don't have any income. And Orbit, they do have a bit of income. It's going to take a long time to build that up. But when Xmithie is just chasing down your support in their base, you're not in a good spot. However, they still have some fight. And something Orbit does that's very important is they don't try to force, awkward engagements. They're not making a big play because they think they have to. They're making a big play when they have to. When, they're in a bad position, and if they don't go for a hard engage, they'll lose. If this inhibitor goes down at this point, V-Team might not have the DPS to hold the lanes, and they might just lose the game at this point. So, Orbit, they're looking for something big to happen. Now, Xmithie runs out, tries to chase the down in Yen, be scary, be intimidating. That's really what his focus is going to be. V-Team has decent damage, though, so Xmithie can't stay out there too long. And actually, an engage comes in from Ferris. The response is, they burst down Elimination. They're trying to kill him as quickly as possible, but he gets the ultimate off, he gets some decent CC up, and there's just a huge cluster as Orbit High runs in there, uses his bolt, distracts everybody. This is a massive cluster. Right? They do take out Muffin Cutie, but High dies in response because he was holding off more or less 3 people on his own. And this is just one of those chaotic situations where, why does this work for Orbit so well? Well, let's watch it again, and let's watch the pinpoint the moments where things go terribly wrong. I know I'm doing a lot of these reviews, but it's important to know what happens. So, watch Balls. Balls is an important person to watch here. He doesn't have Guardian Angel up. And he goes forward, and every time he goes forward and is aggressive, he is relatively easy to kill, even though he has decent mitigation at this point. So Elimination does get caught out, gets ulted by Muffin Cutie, and also silenced by Balls, but still gets the ultimate off. The ultimate hits 3 people. This is when High has a chance to go in, pressure off Xmithie, and just pull people and try to get a distraction for his team. Mandatory Cloud at the same time is rushing in, trying to take out V-Team, but because so many people are wailing on him, by the time Mandatory Cloud goes down and pops his GA, High's about to die at the same point. Muffin Cutie goes in himself, trying to protect Mandatory Cloud, dies in response. Mandatory Cloud, when he respawns, what happens? Well, he's got to run. However, Xmithie is there to distract him. They take out Balls' GA, and Mandatory Cloud actually can't get away. And so, in layman's terms, there was a big chase to pressure Orbit to get to V-Team to get to Yen. However, at the same time High went in, he showed up here. 3 people had to turn and try to focus him down because he was dealing high damage. He might have taken out Xmithie. Because so many people turned to focus him down, guess what? They lost the fight. Now, that's important to note. Even though Ferris has a 13,000 gold lead, even though they're so far ahead, and most people at this point in the game would assume that Orbit has already lost, they're able to keep fighting because High is going in there and being a distraction, being a nuisance, making sure that V-Team is still getting decent damage off. Now, it's important to note, V-Team is 11, 4, and 6. So he's got 15,000 gold, which is about on par with most of Ferris except Balls, who's at 17,000 gold. So he's about as scary as Misfortune. Misfortune right now is pretty scary. So even though High is sacrificing himself and not really in the fights for all that long, he's doing what he needs to do. He's getting cooldowns blown on him, absorbing a lot of damage, and letting V-Team get his DPS off. And it's important to note, V-Team's going to be a better AD carry than Misfortune at this point in the game. Not because he necessarily does more damage, but because he has a much safer option for getting away and getting chased. If Aphromoo is jumped on by High, what is the response? What can Aphromoo do? He can flash, or he can try to fight him. There's no real running from the Diana, and that's the big problem with a lot of AD carries like Misfortune, like Ashe. You have to pretty much stand there and fight. And I think Aphromoo could actually take out High. It's just scary and it's a big risk. So they were able to hold that, take out 4 members, lose 1 themselves on Orbit. but they lost a Nexus turret. They're still behind. They still have to keep turtling. And this is a big problem with this point in the game. Most people don't realize just for how long they have to sit in their base and push back creep waves. It's not a short amount of time. It is quite a while. You're just going to be there going, I really hope the enemy team makes a big mistake. Like, you have to sit there for 10, 20, 30 minutes. In this case, closer to 30. But not a big concern. Now, what are they doing on orbit? They're hiding, they're turtling. They can't go for Baron. Ferris just took Baron. You saw that announcement. And if I look at the vision for orbit, they only have one ward down right here. This is because they know the position they're in. They know they can't force fights. They know they can't be at Baron. They know that even if they lose or leave their lane and leave their base and try to go for Baron, they'll probably lose a fight because minions will take out inhibitors and Nexus turrets. Now this is a big moment right here, because Yuzuki was caught bottom lane. This is actually a big mistake from Orbit. They were too spread out. So they stalled somebody in the lane when Baron was being taken out, and now they lose 2 inhibitors more or less for free. And this is kind of like, well, I think they're dead. But other examples of games like this would be CLG and Dignitas Game 2 at North American Regionals. That was a 70-some minute game. The reason it lasted so long was Dignitas could not break CLG, and the question is going to be, can Ferris break Orbit? Now, look for this fight, look how it starts. Tell me if you like it or not. It's important to note that right now, Orbit, they're trying to stay defensive, but they know that they need to have control of a fight. And it's going to be difficult, because if they walk into the enemy team, there's going to be axes coming out, ruptures, the acceleration gate from Jace is going to be a big issue. But they need to find that solid opening. And it can be when rupture downs, it can be when acceleration gate is down. They have to find that one chance. Now, who's going to start these fights? Hai. Hai's going to be the big man on campus, because he's going to have that dash, he's going to have that pull, he wants to group everybody up together, so Elimination can make everybody dance and they can all get murdered. So what is the big moment for Hai to go in? It's the acceleration gate going down. He flashes in, uses his pull onto just Mandatory Cloud, but this lets Yuzuki get into a really good spot in the middle of everybody, deal quite a bit of damage. Elimination gets his ult off onto 2 people, everybody's kind of grouped up and being hit by the AoE damage from Orbit, and there's not a lot they can do in response. What did Hai do? After he was there for about half a second, he pressed his Zhonya's button. Now he does get taken out himself, but this lets V-Teen survive for quite a while. This lets DN survive for quite a while, and really this just means that they're going to have a solid front line dealing a lot of damage. And that is the role of Hai. He's going to throw himself at the enemy team, he's going to use his pull, he might do a bit of damage, and he might use his Zhonyas. Preferably he's going to get his Zhonyas off. But if he dies so quickly that the end, he doesn't do any damage, it's okay. He doesn't need to die slowly, he doesn't need to die quickly, he just needs to die long enough so that V-Team, Yintanso, and the rest of his team can deal enough damage so that Ferris falls down. Is this possible? Most sure. Most certainly. We just saw it happen right now. And this is going to be the role of an initiator. Your score doesn't really matter. Now, his score is not very good, he's 3-9-14. But he's not there for kills. He's not even there for assists necessarily. He's there to make sure the fight will last long enough in favor of his team that they'll win it. Now, this is a fairly foreign concept to a lot of people. Usually you care, it's like, well, when I initiate, I expect to die, but I should be getting lots of assists, my team should win right away. No, Hai is not setting up the biggest AoE combos. He is setting up Sona Ultimate, and that's a big deal. But that time it only hit 2 people. He's just being a big distraction and nuisance, and he can. He's got 2300 HP, he is squishy, but his shield's going to be 600 damage, which is a decent amount. And he has the Zhonyas, and the Zhonyas is the big lifesaver there. Because you get hit by a Zhonya, or while you're in Zhonyas, it means that the impossible has happened. So Hai, he's just going to go in there, press Zhonyas, and just get the focus from the enemy team. And of course, if they don't focus him, guess what? He can go into Afro, he can kill him very quickly. He has that DFG, he has that high damage. But what do you do as Orbit now? What is the plan? Like, we saw them turtling now, they won a fight. What do they do now? They keep turtling. And this is really the hard part about being behind, because this has been, two situations Orbit has won. If Orbit loses a 5v5 team fight, even if it's just by one person, they'll probably lose the game. And that's really why teams get very nervous about this position, because you don't want to be here. But really, what is Ferris' option if they do have everybody grouped up like this? High's going to start the fight. If they're all spread out, that'll be a good situation for them, but High can still catch one person out. And they're trying to find that decent opening, maybe a chance to, as Muffin Cutie, to ultimate V-Team before a fight starts, stuff like that. And it's not easy to land, it's not easy to rely on, especially because you don't have the most reliable CC. Balls on Cho'Gath, Rupture is a great CC, but it's not reliable. I mean, it does a lot of damage, has a great slow, long knockup, I love it, but they have to make sure they can land it somehow, and that's going to be the tricky part. Now, both teams at this point are poking at the inhibitor and trying to defend it. Mandatory Cloud tries to actually take it out, barely comes short of not killing it. But because he poked out so far, this allows High to go in there and get a great pull. Lemonation shows up, has the ultimate down, and everybody right now on Ferris is grouped up and taking a lot of damage. Now, I don't want to say that this match was won because of High. It was won because of the picks. And every time they got into these late game team fights, what is High doing? He's using his ultimate to get into everybody, pulling them all close together, and they're getting kills with that. Now, the reason I'm saying High isn't the reason that his team won is because, you know, it required his team to follow up and to be dealing damage. Now, this is just footage of Lemonation being awesome. Wait for it, wait for it. Awesome. But that did cost them. That cost them quite a bit. This inhibitor is now down. This inhibitor is now down. This inhibitor is down too. They have no inhibitors. And this is a just terrifying situation to be in. Because every wave, every single wave that spawns is going to have a super minion. In this case, 2. Now, before Door to Camera goes completely insane, how much damage does a super minion do? 330. This is very heavily reduced by armor, of course. And how much HP do they have? 4,500. So 6 of these, every wave will come towards the base. That will completely destroy any Nexus turret, just, you know, in seconds flat. 6 of those guys just will murder a base. Actually, anybody besides V-Team who has a lot of lifesteal is going to have trouble actually killing the creep wave. If you're, say, Lemonation sitting in the creep wave spamming Q, you're going to die. You actually can't kill the creep wave if you're just a very weak support. So High, he's going to have decent AoE he needs to use to clear the creep waves. Yuzuki, same thing. Only Nien and V-Team can really kill those big, huge siege cannon minions, or whatever they're called, super minions. That's the name. And because they know those super minions are the big threat and they can't really be killed quickly, V-Team's just going to have to roam around and kill them as much as possible. Which means more farm for him. This kind of goes back to the same idea. They're still getting farm on orbit. Ferris is not getting it. They are very slowly falling behind in a way. They're far ahead, so it's not really falling behind as much as losing their lead. But still, you never want to lose your lead. There's an old thing I've heard from Jat, actually, and it's if you lose your lead, if you are in the lead at the beginning of the game and you lose it, chances are you will lose the game because there's a reason you lost your lead, and there is some critical flaw with your team. That critical flaw could be item builds, for example. Balls, he doesn't have a lot of tankiness, he does have decent mitigation now that he's picked up a Frozen Heart. But that was a GA before, and he's trading items, and, you know, selling an entire item to buy a Frozen Heart just so your team is more tanky as a whole, it's a big investment, it's a very big deal. Until you eventually reach the point in the game where you have so much gold, you can just sell GA while it's on cooldown, pick it up later. Which Balls is he's actually at that point, because gold is at 85,000, and there's still 17 minutes left of this replay. So, Ferris, what do they do? This is important to say. How do they win these team fights? Well, this is a problem with their team. When they're being forced to initiate on, they don't have a good way to stop it. Leona's ultimate, for example, is a great CC, but it's not likely to hit everybody, especially if Diana's going forward and pulling them all in at once. Mandatory Cloud can start a fight very easily with Acceleration Gate, but if he doesn't have Acceleration Gate up and he's saving it for that fight, his poke is going to be fairly weak. So that's actually something that you can see happening on Orbit. They're waiting for Acceleration Gate before they go for those hard engages because they know when it's down, that great escape ability is going to be gone. They need to find a situation where Orbit is jumping into their team. And when that is happening, Orbit, you know, they're going to be going for those heavy dives. They have to land their Ruptures, have to land their Olaf Axes, they have to land all that awesome damage. This turret is down. That is a bug. It'd be weird if this inhibitor was down and that turret was still up. It'd be very weird. Orbit, though, they need to just keep doing what they're doing, which is hard engaging, fighting through, and winning the fights because of how the hard engages are working, which is enough people are being pulled in by High. And that's not easy to rely on. Once again, there's that fear factor, that thought that maybe we have to make the big play right now because X won't be there in time. And this, for example, is that thinking. Nien flashes and uses his Rue on Tech Smithy. Lemonation uses his ultimate on Balls and Muffin Cutie. Balls having already used his Rupture, so his great catch ability will be up fairly soon anyways. What did this accomplish for Orbit? Really nothing. They blew Misfortune's ultimate, they blew Olaf's ultimate, but Rise has his flash down, and that's going to be a huge deal if he ever gets chased. High, he does his High thing. He pulls people in, but unfortunately Sona doesn't have her ultimate, and can they really win this fight? Not necessarily. Actually, more of an outright no. High does go down, Yuzuki goes down, Elimination is going to be sitting there trying to hold, but he will not survive. Nien, he dies. And why did that happen? Well, they try to force an engage too hard, and this is one of those scary thoughts. This is what you normally see happen at these really long delayed games. One team is just like scared, just like, I have to hold this off, I have to do something now, I have to make a big play. In that case, that big play, it ended pretty terribly. No offense to Nien, Nien's a great player, but the Flash Room Prison onto Olaf was not really going to accomplish anything besides blowing his ultimate, and Flash has a much longer cooldown than that. But V-Team's back up, so is Nien, back at full HP. They're just going to sit by the inhibitor, try and poke it out, try and show their presence once again, but not necessarily be in a dangerous position. It's important to how they play. You'll notice that V-Team's never getting too close for an auto attack, but he is poking a lot with Mystic Shot. With Nien so close on Rise, there's also that big chance, that big factor, that what if the enemy team steps out of position and we prison them? And you can actually tell that Orbit's looking for it, but still, you know, they want to be relatively cautious. They're not going to force a fight. They still lose their inhibitor. Ferris is, you know, just running out of there. It's like, well, we killed 2 inhibitors. They have to throw one back up. That's okay. We're fine. We're fine. We're good. We're good. And when that happens, you know, you got to be very cautious. You got to be very scared. Because we're starting to enter that same sort of situation they were in before. You know, super minions will pile up very quickly, take down systems very quickly. When 2 inhibitors are down, you lose a base much faster than with just one. So, well, Orbit, they're just going to have to keep sitting there, keep turtling, keep being boring. High, all he does at this point is really just auto-attack super creeps and try to kill them. They're just pushing out, trying to get the creep wave as far away from their base as possible because they know it will push back in. Especially because at this point in the game, how much damage is a Warlock doing? A little mage minion? 57. The melee guys are not doing too much themselves, and it's going to take forever to burst down through the 4,500 HP of those super minions. Actually, yeah, 4,900 at this point. That's not going to be easy for anybody to kill. They're going to need help. They're going to need a lot of time and effort to actually take them down, and Orbit knows this, so they're willing to go ahead and just, you know, get some space. But with 1 inhibitor up, there's only 1 target. This is important to note because this means that Orbit kind of hangs around this area, knowing that Ferris will try and go for it. And they're kind of in the same situation where they were before. They want to initiate a fight. They have to find that good catch, but what's it going to be? What's it going to take? Now, looking at Diana's range, it's tricky, but oh, you can't. I forgot you can see in the replay. He pulls in balls. He's trying to set up a good ultimate, and they actually really accomplish very little at the beginning of this fight. High pulls in just Balls. Balls is the only person who is being targeted by Sona's ultimate. It does manage to briefly CC Muffin Cutie, but who cares? And now the ultimate is down for Unlamination. That big, scary, and beefy AoE CC is not going to be there. As for High, you know, he still has his ultimate, he still has his pull, he still has his Zonias, he's fine. But still, they're missing a big important ultimate, that's Sona ult. High, whereas he's trying to help to split push too. So they're kind of conceding at this point, saying, alright, you might take it, but we will hold the other lanes. We will not lose a lane because we're trying to defend, and we can't. Which does happen sometimes. But leaving slow motion, going back to normal motion, Ferris, they just poke at the turret a bit. They just look for those brief openings. Mandatory Cloud actually gets caught out, but he's able to get backed up by his team and just walks out of the fight. This is kind of what happens at this point. You know, all members of Ferris are relatively low, but they're being chased out and, you know, not necessarily killed, but forced to retreat by Orbit, which is important because they need that time to hold their base. What is their next turret at right now? Still 100 HP, or 100%, but it's going to go down very quickly. With each time that super minion strikes, it's taken out about, I'd say 30-some damage, 30-some HP, which is very good for a turret by creeps. Now, why didn't that fight work? Well, the big scary ultimates did not land. They did not get Sona ultimate on enough people, did not get or High's pull onto enough people. They just didn't do enough. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. It's just sometimes the enemy team will be in such a position where you can't really take advantage of them. In that case, it was because they were spread out, and Balls was the only person to initiate a fight on. And by the time the fight was started, it would have been scary. It would have been risky. Orbit, though, they hold, and that's what matters most. That they're still in the game. They're losing objectives left and right. They've lost Dragon, they lost 2 Barons, they lost at least 2 more Dragons. They're sitting in their base farming, but that is letting them come back into the game. As weird as that sounds, the fact that they have inhibitors down means that Orbit's in a financial advantage. Now, financial advantages are not as big a deal in League of Legends as other games, but still, that's a pretty good situation to be in. They will get more gold because they'll constantly be killing enemy minions and enemy super creeps, while Ferris, they're just going to be roaming around the jungle not doing that. So when they do see Ferris going for that CS, that's bad for them, but really, as long as Ferris doesn't get the game done, this is going to help Orbit more in the long term. Now Orbit, they have to defend bottom once again. Ferris is not going to let up with these pushes. There's no real reason to, and High, he's looking for that same opening. He's Diana, he wants to ult in, get people pulled. Can he find that situation? Yes. Now, this is what can go right. 4 people are hit by Sona's ultimate. 4 people were pulled in by Yuzuki, or by High, on Diana. Just looking at the damage, what is happening? Well, Smithy's trying to rush in there and be a big nuisance, but Balls gets taken out with his GA. Aphromoo barely flashes out of there, and the rest of Ferris is in a bad spot. They're about to die. Everybody's below half HP. So going back to real time, they pick up Balls, they pick up Smithy. At this point, Muffin Cutie, Aphromoo, and Mantra Cloud have to run, and they can, because of Jace's acceleration gate. And that was just, a fight going well. Now, what could Ferris do? We've seen what they did before. They can stay spread out. They can make sure that they're not being just completely massacred. But it's not going to be easy to predict that. So it's kind of like, well, they have 20/20 hindsight, but as long as they keep fighting and keep going for good positioning, they can take small risks. Now, the big question is Orbit completely nullifying those risks? Which, if it does happen, Ferris is in a bad spot. Now, a lot of this hold does come down to composition. They don't have anyone very strong at necessarily going for that trade. So, they can't really push on Ferris. And that's something they actually did at this point in the game was, this is kind of the big silly plays that I mentioned before, the big scary plays that may not be the best idea. There are 3 people alive on the enemy team. They send 3 people mid to try and push it, but they have Sona's ultimate up and nothing else. And what happens, Yen, who's going around to go ahead and, I think take Wraiths, gets caught up by Aphromoo, gets caught up by Muffin Cutie, and he does take out Aphromoo's GA, but it's not exactly the best fight. As V-Team, what happens to him? They blow his GA. Aphromoo does go down because Ryza had no interference at killing Misfortune, but V-Team, what situation is he in? He's also in a situation to go down and die. Now, why did that fight work well? Well, it didn't. It did not work well for Orbit. They were able to actually pick up 1 kill, go for one for one, but V-Team's a lot scarier than Aphromoo. Aphromoo is relatively scary, but V-Team's a much more important member of his team, just because so far he's that sustained DPS that is letting people get AoE'd and bursted down. He's that person finishing off the enemy team. And why did that fight not work? Well, they try to fight a 3v3, they try to fight a small skirmish, but the enemy team has a lot of good soloists, and they really didn't accomplish anything. And it's partially because they try to do such a small split. Now at this point, Orbit trying to catch the enemy team, can't quite. We'll say quite can't, but they can't quite, and they just let them walk away. And well, that would have been a very good kill. They could have gotten Baron off of it, but now Ferris is just going to take it. No question, it's there. Why not go for that easy objective? I say easy because of the 58-minute mark, 57.5-minute mark. If you're going for Baron, it's not going to be hard if you have all 5 people there and you're doing well. 5 supports. It'll take a while, sure, but you will still kill it. 5 assassins. You'll burst down instantly. In this case, they have Aphromoo, who's going to do really good sustained damage to that inhibitor. Balls, who has a very high burst damage feast. And Manta Ray Cloud, who kind of the same thing. He'll do really high damage to a Baron. But look at the item builds. Who is done with items? Katarina is, Ryze is, multiple people on both teams are done with their items. Like, they're not going to buy anything besides oracles and potions. I don't mean like health potions, I mean the red pot that provides strength, or not strength, but AD and HP, and the green pot with attack speed and crit, and of course the blue pot with cooldown reduction and ability power. Now, why is it important that item builds are finishing? Well, Ferris has a 9,000 or 8,000 gold lead. And the important thing to see about that is, alright, so that's a big gold lead, but if they're both stuck on items, does it really matter? Okay, so Aframu still, actually, he doesn't. Muffin Cutie still needs items. Xmithy just finished his last item. But it means that there is no longer goods growth coming out from Ferris. Every time they buy an item, they're in an okay spot. Yeah, like, they're getting ahead, but now that they don't buy items, they're not really getting ahead by getting more gold. They're getting ahead a tiny bit because this gives a chance for Leona to buy items. This gives a chance to finish upgrading as Leona, but that's about it. Only Leona's the one being affected by the fact they don't have items. That, and Balls has, for the third time this game, switched items as he sells his Frozen Heart and gets a GA. And Balls had enough money where he could make this happen, though. And it was kind of a funny situation. Don't know if I recommend it, but Orbit, they play safe. They take out these wards, they take out this ward. What is Ferris doing? Bush Warrior 2012, Bush Trap, but 2012. And it's not successful. And it's just because Orbit, they had wards here before. They place them, they make sure they're there, and they back off. And they know that they can't go into the jungle, they know they can't go for big chases. They know one team fight at this point, and the game is over for either side. If it's a big enough team side and one side enough. So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to be aggressive, but they know that they can't be too aggressive. They know they can't walk into dumb situations. Like, once they see 4 people from the enemy team here, they can do what they want. Do they go bot? Do they go mid? Do they go to the enemy jungle? We'll see. They actually just kind of hang on the mid lane, trying to get some decent poke off. But they realize that, okay, if they have all these people here in the mid lane, it means we can push this. We don't have to worry about jungle ganks, which is a relatively big deal, seeing as jungle ganks can really snowball a game or a lane. Imagine if, a Rupture lands over the wall, Balls flashes and eats V-Teen before it can do anything, and your team has to keep fighting. You're not going to be in a good spot. You're not going to feel good, and it's going to kind of suck. Now, Ferris, they do their same old thing. What's Olaf doing? What is Xmithy doing? Roaming around looking for that easy CS. Even though he is done with items, he can always go ahead and buy potions. The rest of Ferris is just kind of chilling by their mid turret, making it look really cool and all. And they know they can't do anything. They know that they've lost enough fights that they're not going to 4v5 at all, and they just have to hold. But they're not going to push on Orbit because what's the point? They could try and damage this turret, they can try and get something done, but it's not necessarily going to be that big of a deal because, well, they need to win with something. Ezreal will have a decent chance of killing that, but something can go terribly wrong. Why take the big risk? What if someone gets hit by Leona ult? What if someone gets hit by Nolofax or a Balls Rupture? There's lots of different things that can go terribly, terribly wrong, and they're not going to risk them on Orbit, which is the sign of a decent team. A good team can see when a situation is bad and good. A great team can see when a situation is bad, good, how much time the enemy is going to invest, and whether it's worth your time or not. So do they keep pushing? No, because the enemy would probably fight back, and it's not worth their time. So high at this point, he's got DFG, Rabadons, Zonias. What is he going to finish up this item build with? I believe it'd be a Void Staff is his next item, though he can't quite afford it. How far is he? A decent chunk. So he just goes back to buy and be relevant and heal up. Now, you'll notice he's been doing the same thing every team fight, just ulting in on someone, pulling them in, and trying to let Lemonation get a good follow-up ultimate. Is it working? Yeah, it actually is. And why? Because it's an effective strategy. They can hold, they can set up those big team fights, they can let Ryze do his good sustained DPS, his good sustained damage, and that will be enough to win them a fight. Looking over at Ferris, Cho'Gath has good burst, Mandatory Cloud has good burst, Aframu has good burst. They have a lot of really good burst and good, okay sustained damage. But they don't have, those big, I'm going to beat completely dominating teamfight abilities besides, the Rupture, besides the Leona ultimate, and those, they're not reliable. That's the big thing with Sona. Her ultimate isn't necessarily targeted, but it's reliable 99% of the time. And if they can go ahead and use that to set up fights, which are being set up by High to make Sona's ultimate that much stronger, it's a really good synergy. And this is what it comes down to. This isn't about synergy, or not. This is about synergy, not just being a strong character in a strong pick or in a strong situation. What makes the situation strong is that the teams have a lot going with each other. We've seen that High, when he sees the enemy team grouping up, will go in, use a pull, and Elimination follows up, and that's just going to be what wins them fights. Now, what's been going on at this point? What has Orbit and Ferris been doing? Nothing. They've been doing very little. And why would they? They're scared. They're very scared of the enemy team getting a good pick off, a good fight off, and just winning. Which can happen here. Respawn timers get ridiculously long. So if you're going to be waiting 60 or 70 seconds just to pop back at your base, the enemy team can pick you off then, and you'll die. Or not pick your team off, and you'll probably die as a team. And this is, I'd say, the scariest moment of League of Legends, and that's why Orbit, what are they doing? They're warding their own jungle very defensively. They're waiting to make sure the enemy team is spotted before they do something like that. And once they ward their own jungle, they'll push out a bit. They need to drop more wards as they push out, but they want to make sure that nothing happens to let them get jumped. Even though, really, who's going to jump them? I mean, Xmithy can throw an axe in, but they're going to run the second they see him on Orbit. Balls, I guess he can hide and try and do a rupture. But when it comes to just like big 5v5 fights, there's no real good trap on the enemy team, but they still have to be conscious. Fights are reaching a point in the game where it's not necessarily determined by skill or by item build, but who just gets the first shot off. And that's, I'd say, one of the scary moments of the game where you can lose not because you didn't have vision, but because something blocked you for however amount of time, for a brief second, a good juke into a brush, stuff like that, and that small delay can cost you so much damage and so much time that you don't have to really work with. In this case, Orbit, they're being aggressive, they're looking for that situation, but they don't have, the biggest threat, the biggest scare. And they know that, we've seen that if High tries to start a fight and the rest of Orbit tries to start a fight with a team backing up and being on the defensive, they're just going to lose that fight. They're just going to get kited and die. Baron's up though, and this is the coolest moment of the game. I want to go to the vision of Ferris. It's very important to look at things from their perspective. So here, they see Orbit at Baron. Elimination actually close enough to reveal the ward. And High goes back and walks to his base. Now, Ferris, they don't really know where the enemy team is. They think that High is going with the rest of his team. Whoever they see first, they're going to assume the enemy team is coming from that direction. So if Orbit's walking through here, they'll see them coming. They spot High out, they spot Orbit here, they realize they're pinched, and they freak out. And this is such a scary moment because the fight happens. Let's watch this fight. Now, Ferris got criticized a lot for that action, for that play. They back off, and why did they back off? Because they weren't confident they could win a fight quickly enough. They thought, people said maybe they could try and Zerg the turret, Zerg the Nexus, but they didn't have that vision, that knowledge, that High was going to try and pincer them till the last second. They might have thought they could turn and very quickly kill High, but I want to go over that fight. I want to go over what happened and why it's so cool. So, vision for everybody. High, he's coming in from the side. Why is this so important? Well, he spent so much time trying to come back and walk back, he doesn't have time to go back. High is going to go ahead, try and pull people in and start the fight here. This is actually a good situation for High, because A, he breaks the Banshee's Veil from after move, forces that flash out, uses his pull, and Elimination gets an amazing Sona ultimate that hits 4 people. The follow-up ultimate comes in from Ezreal. High uses his Zonias to not die, survives with 16 HP. Nothing right there. But he did his job. He distracted the enemy team, he survived for long enough so that his own Sona and the rest of the team could come in and do the damage, and then he just shows up himself to the fight. He's not doing a lot, he's really just tossing out Presence Strike because he's too low to go in, but he helps finish somebody off, he helps balls go down, and they win the fight. That's a 5-0 at this point in the game. Yuzuki does blow his Guardian Angel, they did get 1 pseudo kill, but Xmithy has to run, and it was a 1 fight for Orbit. And that's why these late game situations can be so scary. Did Orbit win it because their team composition is better than Ferris's? Kinda. I actually really like Orbit's team comp, and Ferris's does not really have that solid initiation or really amazing bulk. But They won that fight because they got the first strike, because they caught Ferris out of position. They were there as 5 people, but Ferris was just a bit too clumped up. Now, is that a good situation? No, it's a very scary situation to be in. But, Orbit got this win, they did what they needed to do, and it's awesome. Now, how do you know if you can win a fight? Normally, 99% of the time, it's if you get that first good catch off, that first good CC. That's why Malphite's really good. That's why there are so many strong characters in League of Legends that are based almost entirely off catching people off guard. Now, my webcam's a bit funky right now, so I can't transition myself. That's the real reason it's not being shown. But I want you to think of 3 characters that are good just because they catch people off guard. So Malphite, I'd say, is one. Diana's very good at it too. Rumble. What does Rumble do mid to late game? He doesn't do anything really. Like, his damage is really good, but if you rush in, you tend to die. No, he's really useful mid to late game because his ultimate is so good. That's important to know. He's not good because of his kit as a whole. He's good because you can use his ultimate and then follow that up with the kit, and the kit will be kind of useful, but the ultimate will just trap teams and get them caught off guard. Now, I have to go ahead and start preparing because World is tomorrow, so I will see you there, folks. But yeah, adios.